let's discuss exactly what happened on Friday afternoon. There are a lot of moving parts that I want to get into. I want to share some things behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. So, shortly after we got off the air on Friday, they announced that the SEC and Big Ten would do this coalition sort of thing. First of all, let me get your thoughts on that, Caleb, and what you think this might mean for the state of college football. Because I don't think it's big. I think it's monstrous.
I think it's huge. Now, I want to be upfront with everybody. I'm not unaware of the alliance, quote unquote, that the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the Pac 12 or the Big Ten and the ACC or whatever, there were three conferences that formed an alliance to counter the growing power of the SEC. They did that in 2021. But Dave, you and I knew from the start that alliance was a lie because you and I both knew the Big Ten, they may form an alliance with these conferences, but they'll poach those conferences the second they get the chance, which is exactly what they did. And yeah, so it was laughable when that alliance was formed. We all knew it was a hollow alliance then. It was all out of anger of the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma. The Big Ten pretended to be principled, and they said, you know what? Screw this alliance. We're going to go poach the Big Ten and add some of our own teams now. And so that alliance was totally hollow. This alliance isn't hollow. Okay, you have these, both of these conferences are embedded with TV deals, TV networks that don't want to give up these conferences. They don't want to give them up at all. And so they have a ton of power, and the networks have a ton of power, and nobody has incentive for these conferences to really poach each other, I guess. You will see some geographical fights if the ACC becomes available, but this is a clear alliance to say that for them to realize that we don't really need the NCAA anymore. We are so powerful on our own as mega conferences that there's absolutely no reason for us to acquiesce to the NCAA's demands at this point.
Okay, I want to unpack a couple of things. I want to start with time frame. Here are my thoughts on time frame. Let's get yours. While the NCAA has moved incredibly slow when it comes to college football, they haven't moved slow lately. It seemed like NIL just bam happened. It took a little bit longer, but the transfer portal just happened. The playoffs just happened. I think we were maybe on the air at one point when it went from a 4-team to a 12-team playoff just like that. And then I think we're also on the air when they moved it up a year. So these things are happening quicker than they did previously. Caleb, a previous generation like me, would look at something like this and say, get back to me in 25 years. This ain't a 25-year thing. This is going to be something they're going to move, I think, quickly on. Now, you mentioned that coalition, and there are agreements in place for the college football playoff. But my question to you is, how long does that contract run? And do you really put much stock in that? Because every contract's breakable, right?
No, I don't. And honestly, the contracts don't even have to be broken. The NCAA doesn't put on the college football playoff. The athletic directors and conference commissioners do. The SEC and Big Ten could very easily say to ESPN, which carries the college football playoff, that's what the deal is happening right now, say, hey, we just want this to be our two conferences and nothing else. Don't carry any other teams in this. This is our playoff. We run it, and this is what we want on your network. I mean, I have a feeling it wouldn't be too hard to renegotiate that deal with ESPN. I doubt ESPN has signed a contract with these other athletic directors. I mean, what are these entities that exist? So I guess theoretically, it's the College Football Playoff Committee that is the entity that was agreed upon by all the conference commissioners and athletic directors at the time. But that entity is only as powerful as the most powerful people who agree to acknowledge its existence, isn't it? So, I mean, if the SEC and the Big Ten decide we don't really want to be a part of this, I'm pretty sure ESPN could easily break that contract with the CFP committee, and the SEC and Big Ten could form their own contract with ESPN at that point.
Well, let's ask this question. Would Tennessee definitely be in? I think it's a lock now, but I don't think it necessarily was 4 years ago. I think Tennessee was that program that was teetering on the brink. And let me tell you why. First brought to you by Don Self, donself.net. He is in the greater Chattanooga area. He is your State Farm agent. Customer service still matters. Over 40 years in experience. Greater Chattanooga area. 423-396-2126, 423-396-2126, or just go to donself.net, donself.net. That's right below. So Tennessee is definitely in. They're the top half of the SEC. So you would think the top half. Now, I'm looking way forward. I'm looking, Caleb, so I want to make sure we're on the time frame. I'm looking to the point in which the college football playoff means that all of these conferences are going to select their best teams. And the college football committee, whoever this is, are going to select the best teams for a super conference. So I think that eventually, I know you disagree, I think some Vanderbilt, some Northwesterns will be left out, and you'll include some other former Pac-12 teams, and you'll have the best 32, 38 teams. That's the goal. Tennessee was teetering on the brink of not being in this not that long ago. Tennessee was a program that was listless for a decade, that didn't have much excitement around the program. Nobody was jumping up and down and cheering for Jeremy Pruitt in Neyland Stadium, and I can't see I blame them. I'm not saying that if the same administration was in place now that had been then, that Tennessee wouldn't have made a super conference, but I will at least say it would be worth sweating it a little bit. If they had continued to be that poor for what would be now 15 years, and I just don't think that would have been a good look for Tennessee getting in there. But I think Tennessee's a lock for a super conference 99 times out of 100.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree. I think it's 100 out of 100. And the reason I'm going to disagree, and I'll get, if the super conference happened tomorrow, if it just happened tomorrow, just like that, you and I both know Nebraska would be in there. Nebraska hasn't been relevant in 20 years, and Nebraska would still be in that super conference. And because of the revenue and the power they bring in and things they generate. If there was, if you go to, if baseball, or if the NBA, if baseball decided to break off and say, we're only going to take like the 15 best teams and form another super league. No matter what happens, the Yankees will always be there, no matter how bad they are, no matter how bad the Red Sox is, no matter how the Red Sox are, no matter how bad the Cowboys are. If the NFL decided we're going to contract to 16 teams, the Cowboys would be in that 16 teams, no matter what they did the year before. And I think Tennessee would be in that situation.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's in. I mean, I think at worst they would get around that 25 to 30 spot of being selected had they kept Pruitt, had all those things just stayed bad instead of gotten so bad that you had to make a change. So I'm clearly talking theoretical now. It will be very interesting to see how this develops. I'm going to pat ourselves on the back for here just a second at Off the Hook Sports. I think we provided you with some info that you didn't know about, and this is going back 18 months. It's brought to you by the Hemp House, the premier hemp dispensary online with a wide variety, great selection, and strict standards to ensure you only receive the best in CBD or Delta products. Hemp House Chat at 2Ts.com. Hemp House Chat with 2Ts.com. I think Greg Sankey was giving me a little bit of a hint. He and I, for whatever reason, have a good rapport. I'm not saying that I'm in tight with him. I don't have his cell phone number. But I just felt like, and I told you this at the time, if you remember, Caleb, he goes, well, let's just see what happens with these TV contracts. So you've criticized the SEC TV contract. You've got every right to do so on paper. But if it changes somehow, then you look at it in retrospect in a different way. I believe firmly that Sankey thought all of this was coming and all of these deals are going to be somewhat reorganized for a super conference, because you're basically walking in and saying, boom, I've got something a lot better for you. Caleb, I've stood by that the whole time. I didn't think the television contract would prove to be as bad as it looks on paper right now, but you said it's bad. Do you change your thoughts on it whatsoever?
No, not yet. And here's why. I don't see unless he himself becomes conference commissioner or super conference commissioner, I don't see the incentive for Greg Sankey to want a super conference. I don't see the incentive for any conference commissioner to want a super conference. I mean, the whole
cash
Dave,
money.
let's be honest.
Cash money. What are you talking about?
Wait. Cash money that he wouldn't get. What would be the purpose of his job as SEC commissioner if there's a super conference?
Well,
Like,
actually think that that and if you look at Sankey and what he's doing, I think he could be the commissioner of football one day. I think he could be the Roger Goodell of football.
so what happens if he plays himself and they do the super conference and instead Nick Saban gets appointed commissioner and then Greg Sankey's out of a job?
Yeah,
I
fair
mean, so
enough.
this is a big risk to think I want super conference. I think the conference commissioners are going by the way of the NCAA in 10 years. In 10 years, Dave, we're going to be talking about conferences the way we talk about the NCAA now, which is their whole business is staying in business. And because I personally think conferences make no sense now in this day and age in college football,
Okay.
I agree with I'm with you. The 38-40 team mega conference, whatever it is, I personally like 60 to 70 because I think I like college football as more of a national sport. But whatever, we can quibble with that. I like the idea of a bunch of teams and just one all being independent. They all negotiate their own TV deals and they just agree to scheduling each other. Like a Tennessee can just pick their own rivals who they play on a yearly basis. I think
No,
that's the best way to do it.
I'm fair with that. Okay, so let me. Well, now I want to see I want to see a super conference where every game's scheduled. There are no non-conference schedules.
Well, I agree. I agree.
Okay.
So there's no conference. There's no conferences. Period. In my
No,
ideal
I'm
world.
with you. I'm with you. I agree with that. All right. So what SEC teams should be worried about getting left out of this thing?
Well, obviously Vanderbilt because it's if this happened, if this became a mega conference and they excluded teams later, Vanderbilt is 100% done for. I mean, it's over. And by the way, I don't think they would care if they were
Haven't
left
you
out.
said Vanderbilt original charter member and all that stuff, and that they're never going to go away? Didn't you tell me all that? I mean, how can you just diss Vanderbilt after
Wait,
they've
a
gone?
charter school of the SEC. If there's a super conference that we're talking about, the SEC doesn't exist anymore.
That is true.
Like, yeah. So a super conference assumes that there's no such thing as the SEC or the Big Ten anymore. So who cares if you're a charter member? Vandy's in trouble. Missouri's probably the second most in trouble one. And then I would say Mississippi State. And then I would probably go South Carolina. Those are the four that I think are in the most trouble of any programs.
Did you say Arkansas?
I think Arkansas could get in. Have you looked at the revenue? They are loyal like Nebraska. They
No, they are.
generate revenue.
They got that Walmart money too. I mean, everybody there makes $125,000. You just bump into somebody, like, hey, I might be worth $1 million next year.